slide it over to Lucas. It's recording. All right, take it away, Lucas.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. So again, hi, my name is Lucas, and I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to come today. A little bit about myself. I'm an environmental design graduate. I graduated last April in 2020, so one of the COVID graduates. And I think for me as creative, what I'd like to consider myself as is a bit more multidisciplinary, even though I did graduate from the environmental design program. So I spent a lot of my time in undergrad actually doing graphic design and like coding websites and stuff for an engineering firm. But I think for me as a creative, what I get most inspired by is being able to tell a story. And so that's what we're going to actually do today. We're going to learn how to basically create a conceptual, like kind of visual or image or collage or whatever you want to call it, to better communicate your ideas and the kind of the story that you want to tell. And we're going to do this without any kind of modeling software. So if I'm actually just going to share my screen, because I forgot to do that. Cool. I'm going to assume everyone can see that. If not, again, feel free to drop it in the chat. But yeah, this is going to be the kind of end goal that we're going to be going for by the end of this workshop. And kind of the idea behind it is that we're going to go something straight from your hand, whether it's a drawing or even a photograph or something you drew digitally, and then kind of bring it to life with ideas of like texture and materiality and all those kinds of things. And so that's kind of done in 5 stages. I'm going to scooch my face somewhere else. Ooh, cool. So that's the end goal that we're going to go for. So we're going to start a new project just at the top. And when we go through, that's better, okay. When we go through this whole workshop, feel free to do it along with me, or you can just pay attention as well. I know that the student union will be uploading this on the social media after, so you can always refer back to it if you ever get the chance to. So we have a new file here in Photoshop, and go be whatever size that you please. So the first thing that I'm going to do actually in this stage of creating these visuals is really starting with your sketch. And it doesn't need to be a sketch again with pen and paper. It could be done on a drawing tablet, which I'll be doing today, just so you're able to see what I'm doing. Maybe you could also do this on top of a photograph or whatever you've taken. It's really whatever you're most comfortable with when it comes to drawing your scene. So the first thing I actually tend to do when I give myself this kind of blank canvas, which is sometimes intimidating, is starting off by sketching some kind of vanishing point. So in doing that, we're able to really start to give ourselves a reference as to how we want to create the scene and what kind of vantage point we're going to be giving ourselves. And this doesn't mean you have to start really following this vanishing point religiously. It's just something to really help you, guide the rest of your drawing. So the main goal, again, for this sketch is to really just allow yourself to fluidly imagine and design the space. So, for example, I'm probably in this kind of tutorial just going to loosely mimic the thing that I showed you at the beginning, because that's what we're going to try to get at the very end of this workshop. And so I'll just kind of imagine if you guys were doing this on your own sketchbook or whatnot, just being able to create just, for example, a series of volumes that we can end up filling in after. So maybe that's a wall, and maybe we got a floor of some sorts. Whoa. And if you are following along in terms of like actually drawing with me, of course you don't have to, but if you are, feel free to not follow the exact drawing I'm doing. It could be whatever you really want to do. So let's just say we had something like that. I think in the other version I had a block here as well, which I'll just quickly add in. And yeah, perfect. So let's say you had this on your notepad or whatnot. Again, I did this on my drawing pad just for the sake of this kind of workshop. But then once you're done sketching, whenever that may be, your next step would be to take a picture of your drawing or scan your drawing and then move it over into Photoshop. And, you know, again, it doesn't have to be a perfect photo or a perfect scan, but do try your best to keep the photo as flat on as possible, just so that, you know, when it comes time to putting it into Photoshop, you're able to do things with a bit more accuracy and the photo isn't skewed and everything. So once you do have the sketch, the next stage of it will be something I like to call the masking phase. I'm not sure what everybody's kind of familiarity with Photoshop is, but Photoshop has this really cool thing where you can basically create a mask on top of your, like, the different layers that you have to kind of control where certain things appear and where they don't appear. So what I'm going to do is going to go to the bottom here under the layer panel and create a new group, and I'll just call it, what am I calling this? I'll call it texture, because ideally we're going to give texture to our drawing, and I do it in all caps because I like to scream at myself. Also, another big thing to do as well that I find helpful is, even though if I have the vanishing point in the drawing, sometimes it is helpful for me to have that vanishing point recognized by Photoshop. And an easy way to do that is to go to the ruler that you see kind of on the outsides of your canvas and just click and drag, and you'll be able to pull a guide to get yourself kind of onto the canvas. And that blue line is just basically going to be a guide that will allow shapes and all your different layers to snap to. If you don't see the ruler, what you can do is go to View at the top, and then the ruler should be over there. If you're on a Mac as well, Command R tends to be pretty useful. And so that's the first bit of it. And let's just get that there. And so now I've basically set up my vanishing point already, which will be very useful when we get to this next step. So back to the masking phase. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the bottom here, where I have the rectangle tool. And I'm basically just going to start creating these faces on Photoshop. For the sake of this workshop, you know, we're just going to be working in rectangles, but after you see kind of the process that we're going to go through, you can start to do it with any kind of shape. It can be circles or basically anything you can really imagine. So let's just say this is going to be a brick wall. So I'll make a new folder within the texture folder and just call it brick. So I'm gonna just create a simple shape right here. And you know, for this brick wall, that'll be the front face. I have a tendency to make my, you know, Photoshop layers labeled. I know some people don't, but I think in terms of when you're doing these collages, it's going to be really helpful to know which layer is going to be which. So I would definitely get in the habit of labeling these things. So that's the front. And then we're going to have that side kind of surface as well. And so now the goal when it comes to doing this masking phase is to start to get your surfaces in perspective on Photoshop. So what we're going to do here, I'm just going to lighten that a little bit. What we're going to do here is match the side surface with that front surface. I'm going to make that a different color just so you can see. And then we have our vanishing point here. So what you can actually do in Photoshop is you can start to use the corner joints and push and pull them to get them to match with that vanishing point. So on the Mac, at least, what you can do is you can press Command and Shift. I think on the PC, it's probably Control and Shift, and hold on to Command and Shift, and then just drag up your your corner joints and get them like so. The idea is to get those two corners and squeeze them as close to that vanishing point as possible. Photoshop won't allow you to get them to actually touch, but that's okay. You don't have to get it too perfect, even though I seem to be being really fussy about it right now. So when you look back at this, now we're starting to skew that shape to get into the perspective that we need it to be. And once you get to that point, you don't have to touch the corner joints anymore. If you start touching the corner joints again, it's going to get out of that perspective. So what that next step is starting to use those edge joints instead. So the ones that aren't on the corners, but the ones here. And what you can see is that when I start to pull this back, Photoshop keeps it in perspective because it saves that kind of skew setting that you've put to it. And even if I want to make it taller, it'll skew it for you. And so in that way, we're able to have essentially what we created was a mask that we can use to skew our textures that we'll lay on top after. When this shows up, yeah, it's cool if it turns into a live shape. You can just click yes. And so before we finish the other ones, I'll just show you guys what the full thing will turn into. So what I can go to File and go to Place. And so for me, I mean, throughout undergrad, I've just basically accrued a bunch of different overlays and a bunch of different textures that I've basically gotten through other people or in Google Images or whatnot. And so this is actually really useful resource to have. And essentially what's inside is just a bunch of different textures that you can use, that you can start like laying into your drawing. And so it's a really, resourceful thing to have your own kind of library. If you don't have your own library, then it'd be good to get a start on one. And if you do have one, I'm actually okay with sharing my own if you guys, do want a little bit of a head start in creating your own. But so for example, I'm just going to throw in a brick layer. And so now what I want you to pay attention to is in the layer panel, what we're going to do next, because what I'm going to do with this brick layer is that I wanted to put it on top of this front face, because I want to start texturizing this front face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it one layer on top of that front face, just one right above, so that when I right click on it, I can go to Create Clipping Mask. And that's essentially going to embed it within that one face. But the reason why this is cool is because when I select the texture brick and I try to, move it around and make it bigger, make it smaller, it'll stay within that mask. It'll stay within those boundaries that we set earlier. And so I can just size it to fit within the mask. And, there you go. That's going to be the first of the textures. Going into the side panel, it's going to be basically the same thing. So again, we're going to have the brick texture that we want, one on top of the side layer, so that when I go create clipping mask, it'll go one down. Photoshop will always do it to the layer right below it. That's just kind of the way they decided to make it. So yeah. So now we're in the side panel. And just for my own sake, I'm going to try to match up the bricks from the front and the side. And now since we created that mask earlier, what I can actually do is just match the corners with the respecting corners of the mask. So really matching the texture with the mask that we created. And what you'll notice now is that when I start to mask these corners and match them, the thing will stay within the perspective that we created. So you really start to be able to create or mimic that depth or that kind of perception that we want to have and that we originally sketched. So I'm going to click the check mark at the top. And so that's basically one face that we have already. And that was all really just a work of, Photoshop kind of doing its own thing, using the skew and the warping and transforming tools that are within Photoshop. So, that'll be the brick wall, and then we can continue moving forward with all the other surfaces. So we'll do a floor. So we'll go back to the rectangle tool, and then we'll start to create that surface as well. So what I'm going to do is do the same thing we did before. Actually, I will keep that there for now, and I'll show you why in a second. And then we'll start to squeeze towards that vanishing point again, the vanishing point that we've had set up. And this is why the guidelines are helpful, because it just moves along that guideline of the vanishing point that we set up at the very beginning. And then when I get to here, I can just pull that surface back, and it'll stay in perspective. And the reason why I kept that aligned with the initial wall that we set up with is, one, to make sure that, these two surfaces will be touching, so there won't be a big gap. But then also now, when I pull this back, it'll still, pull the surface towards kind of the viewpoint. And again, let me just click yes to that. And then we'll do maybe like a concrete kind of thing. Sure, that's cool. And then I'll right click here again, create a clipping mask, and just again, match the corners. And that's really all you got to do, because we set up all our perspective earlier. And the good thing about using the mask as well is that it should pretty much just snap the corners for you. So it's really easy. There we go. And that's the floor. So I'll zip through the next little bit, but you can start to see how, the workflow is really just a few steps to get those textures onto your canvas. I actually just skipped a step. I forgot to make the surfaces. So we'll do front surface. And then we'll also do the side, close that. And follow that same kind of guideline. Put that towards the vanishing point, and then bring it back that way. Where is it? There it is. Yes, and we'll name this layer side. Okay, so we have our concrete, and I right click, and just size that appropriately, and then do that one more time for the side as well. Forget what it was. Sure. And clip it again. And match the corners. Okay. For the sake of time, we'll just keep it with this for now, and then if there's time after, we'll get back to the last piece. But essentially, it'd be the same process again. And that's basically the way you would start adding texture to your space and keep it within perspective. What I would do also is, if you do want to add a bit more depth to your drawing, what you can do is you can start to change the brightness of certain surfaces to make certain areas kind of pop more. So for example, for this front surface of the brick, what I can do is I can just go to image and then adjustments, and then I usually like to use the hue saturation, And then for lightness, maybe just knock it down a few steps. Yeah, I guess that's cool. And then just make sure that, you know, all your surfaces kind of agree with each other by how bright they kind of want to be. So get the hue saturation again for the concrete, and yeah, that's cool. And then we have that, and you know, it was really quick, really easy, and we were able to already start to bring to life what we kind of started off with, which was essentially just a sketch, but now we're starting to create a bit more space and create more life into it. And so now I'm going to create a new folder, and we're just going to call it overlay. And I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. We're just going to start laying in things on top of our drawing. And so part of that kind of resource library I have is not just textures, but you know, it's also good to collect a bunch of different people. I know a lot of people like to go to certain websites, especially with environmental design. People love to use the Scalgoober website to get, you know, a lot of people to put into their renderings and whatnot. I do as well. I probably have the entire library saved on my hard drive now, so you know, there's that. But you know, I'm going to put the person into the overlay folder. And a rule of thumb when it comes to putting people in some kind of perspective is keep the eyes always with that horizontal kind of vanishing point. And that way it won't seem like they're like floating in airs, you know, just not, they don't seem like they're part of the actual scene. Because you could imagine that if I like, you know, put them here, yeah, their feet are still on the, you know, concrete, but now they also look like they're 10 feet tall. So, you know, I mean, unless if they are, maybe don't do that.
Yeah.
So it's,
we just had a question in the chat. What was the name of that website that you mentioned?
Oh yeah, Scalgoober. So a lot of people, I'll type it out here. How do I move this? There we go. Yeah, so this is the website that a lot of people go to. It's where this person is from. And essentially there's just a whole list of, you know, different cutout people. And the reason why people like using this website so much is because they're PNG files, so they're transparent. So when you put them in, they're really just like cutouts. You don't have to do anything to them to, you know, make them blend in. So that's the website.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And just for reference, I'll, you know, keep that up there if anyone else wants to know. Now this looks like a Scalgoober kind of advertisement, which is cool. Yeah, so you can throw in people, and then also on top of that, you can start throwing in trees, really whatever you want, like any bushes or like literally anything. So, you know, maybe we'll do this, which, oh, it's got lied to. Okay, so in the event that you have, you know, some kind of thing you want to drop in and it's not, you know, it doesn't have a transparent background. If it's white like this, there is an easy way around it, which wasn't planning to actually show today, but I guess we'll get a little bonus tip. The first thing you're going to do actually is go to the layer panel, select on the layer that you want to change, and make sure that's rasterized. So I right-clicked it, and I'm going to click Rasterize Layer. That's basically just going to enable us to actually start making changes to this layer. The next thing after that is you're going to go to Select, and you're going to go to Color Range. And now you're going to have, well, you're probably actually going to have this little eyedrop icon for your cursor now. And you're going to click on the blank space that's around it. Mine already did it by default, but if it doesn't, just click on the blank space around it. And this is going to be a little preview on this window, just a little preview of what it's going to exactly select for you. Because basically what this tool does, it'll search the entire canvas that you have on your screen and select everything that's a white pixel. And then the fuzziness here just kind of, you know, changes how much it'll select. But, you know, in terms of this purpose, it's good to keep it at 200. So once you get to that point, just click OK. It'll select everything that's white. And really, anything that you do after that is just click delete on your keyboard or backspace or whatever it is. And then, boom, you have a tree. let's say I want to put this tree behind the brick wall. So in the layer panel, I'll just, drag my tree below the texture folder, which has the brick wall. And I'll just size it so it's not so overly ginormous. And yeah, sure, that works. And now you have a tree. Yeah, and you can really just keep going with this kind of idea. And maybe I'll just do one more for the sake of really hitting home the kind of process. Let's use, sure. And I'll put that back in the overlay folder. And so you can start to see how really when you have just two things, one, a good sketch to start off with to base your kind of environment around it, and then two, a decent kind of texture and overlay library, which is easy to kind of accumulate. You can actually really start to leverage it and to make a really good sort of environment for yourself to really visualize what it is. And the reason why this is useful, I think, for me, especially during undergrad, is I think for me at least, a lot of the time, especially being environmental design, profs and instructors will always ask you to create some kind of conceptual sketch or situational sketch, or just visualize your idea and that kind of thing. And sometimes they might ask you for just a hand-drawn kind of thing, which you can easily do on your own with just your sketchbook and a pencil or whatnot. But if they start to ask you to add elements to it and start to communicate some kind of materiality, this can start to be kind of a useful way to do it.
We had another question in the chat, Lucas.
For sure. Yeah.
Can you repeat what you did to delete all the white in the tree picture?
For sure. Yeah. So
thank you.
We'll get to that again. So in the event that you come across this, which is always annoying when it comes to, you think you get a transparent thing, but you don't. So we're going to do, the first thing is in the layers panel, you're going to have to rasterize the layer. And basically what rasterizing again does is it essentially lets you create, little alterations to the layer. Once you do that, you can go to the top, go to select, and go to color range. The color range kind of select tool, basically, when I use this eyedropper tool, whatever I use it to select, or whatever I use to click it, it'll make that kind of selection for me based off of the color on the canvas. So if I click the white, then it'll, select all the white on my canvas. So when I do that, got the color range window pop up. The fuzziness you don't have to worry about. It's basically just saying how much of the kind of color you want to select will actually be selected by Photoshop. I generally keep it at 200. That tends to do the work when it comes to doing this kind of stuff, creating a transparent image. So once I do that, I can click OK. And then you can start to see how Photoshop makes that selection of all the different white areas within the image here. And then to get rid of it, I just hit delete on my keyboard, backspace or delete, whatever your keyboard says. And then it should get rid of that immediately, which is great. Yeah, so that's essentially how that's done. I'm going to prop it back behind the brick wall again. And essentially that's basically the framework as to how I go about my own situational sketches. It's a pretty lightweight, pretty streamlined kind of way to go about it. And of course, this is a pretty simple image. You can continue to, really work with the image and add more elements to it. Of course, when it comes to making these images, we've only taken half an hour in terms of this time, but I mean, these processes can go on for hours and hours, depending on however much detail you want to add. But I think the main thing in terms of really getting started is being able to skew those textures to really get, really being able to get that depth in terms of your image. And you can imagine that even if I went out and took a picture of a building, like for example, here we'll do, I'm gonna do something fun. I don't know if you guys can see me go on Google Images right now. I don't know how to do zoom, but let's say if we want to get like the OCAD building, cool. And let's say if I wanted to just, you know, add the, ooh, it doesn't want to let me use that image. Let's just say they wanted me to add the, cool, there we go. I don't know if you guys can see what I'm doing right now, but basically I'm trying to save an image of the OCAD building Dalmatian cow thing. Cool, okay.
Just so you know,
So,
what we can see only your Photoshop.
Just the Photoshop, right? Okay, cool. Basically, behind the scenes, I saved the I saved an image of OCAD, and you know, even when it comes to a photo, it doesn't have to be a texture, but even if it's a photo, what I can do is, you know, let's say I wanted to put this on that brick wall that we set up for ourselves. So what I can do is I can create that clipping mask again. I'll go within that brick wall, and then we'll do the thing that we did earlier where we just start to match the corners. Yeah, and so there, I think for me this was also really useful when I was studying in the environmental design program, because it's essentially just a way to actually start to give your thing, you know, site and context, and just be able to communicate where exactly the location of your building might be. And so you can, oh, it's not letting me. Damn. Okay. Sure, let's just say that's that. And so, you know, you can start to mimic these kind of textures and patterns that you even see around you. So it's useful to do those kind of site visits or go to the location and take pictures and just be able to put those into your collage as well. And yeah, essentially that's the basics of creating these kind of images. Again, it really is just a matter of your own imagination and how you're able to alter the images and create your own surfaces to create these kind of environments. And I think, you know, I think for me personally, we did obviously have to rush through the sketching bit just for more, you know, exemplary purposes. But, you know, really take time at that sketching kind of stage, because the more you're able to add detail to your sketch, I think the more depth and the more kind of creativity you can go into it when it comes to adding it on Photoshop. So yeah, essentially that's basically how we were able to go from just an image like this, where we had our sketch, and then just really start to overlay, you know, simple ideas and simple kind of textures to it. So yeah, if anybody has any questions or concerns or really anything, yeah, I'd love to be able to hear them.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Lucas. Yeah, I know I said at the beginning, turn your mics and cameras off, but if you have a question, feel free to turn your camera and your mic on and ask Lucas, or just type in the chat if you're if you don't feel like you want to turn on your camera and mic right now. So yeah, open to the floor.
I'm also going to see. I'm actually struggling to find. Does anyone know how to get the like unminimize zoom so I can see the window again?
Oh, you might have to stop sharing. I can't remember.
Maybe okay. In that case,
maybe stop sharing, and then if somebody has a question, you can start sharing again.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's a good question, Raquel.
There we go.
We just had a question in the chat, Lucas, about where to access the video. We're going to be posting it to Instagram. We're posting them in order, so we're still posting the last couple of last semester. So I think Actually, this one is probably going to get posted in a couple weeks. It's going to be on our website and on Instagram and stuff like that. The reason why it takes a couple weeks is we're getting it captioned, and we're also going to be doing, actually this will be open to anyone in the chat here, but we're going to be announcing that we're doing a call for submission to do the title card for this video. So that's why it takes a couple weeks.
That's exciting.
Yeah, should be cool. They're gonna watch the video, and then they're gonna try to come up with a title card that fits the vibe of the video.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be exciting to see what people come up with.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions from anyone? Or was there anything else that you wanted to touch on, Lucas?
No, I think that's essentially what the flow is. But I mean, if people have any, okay, I think we have another question here. How long does it usually take to create an artwork like that? It really depends on how much kind of detail you want to put into it. But I would say, I mean, for example, that one, you can tell it like we were all here. It only really took about half an hour. And it might not take you half an hour the first time you go about it. It might take time to getting used to getting all the masks and kind of sketching out your ideas, because I did go in, I mean, with a general idea of what I wanted to draw. But I think if you give yourself a good like 30 minutes to an hour on it, to really get yourself through that process, you can probably come up with a very good image that kind of gets the idea across to people. But really, it's as long as you want to spend with it. Which is great. Yeah. You are very welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you. So it looks like there might not be any other questions. We'll wait for one last moment for the questions. But other than that, thank you, Lucas. This was a really good workshop. I think it was, can you show us your artworks?
Ooh.
Yeah, you could do that if you want to, or you can leave your social media links in the chat as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do a bunch of work, again, as a multidisciplinary artist. Is there anything like in particular you're looking for? Like whether it's more architectural stuff or drawing or graphic-y stuff? Wasn't the most colloquial way of saying it, but potentially. Don't be shy.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, do you have a website?
Yeah, so I do have a website with my work on it. I'll type it in the chat. Really simple. It's just my name, lukaschan.me. And over there, you can just see a bunch of the work that I do, even in OCAD and even outside of OCAD. Just a lot of architectural work, or not a lot, but there's some architectural work, graphic design work, and a bunch of drawing there as well. On there as well, I mean, since we're already there, you can email me actually at that email, hello@lukaschan.me, and I'd be happy to be able to, answer on any other questions that you guys may have in terms of the workshop, in terms of even just, school, especially if you're in environmental design, because if you've just joined, like I graduated from environmental design this past April, so I kind of know the whole, stress and struggle of it. So I'd be happy to help you guys out, or if you have any other questions, you can let me know there. But yeah, that's basically how you guys can get a hold of me. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, that's actually, you guys can feel free to check out the Ripple Mag as well. That's something that my friend from high school set up. She's really just doing it casually, but it's the vision of being able to just tell a bunch of stories on a big kind of like digital magazine. So if you go to theripplemag.ca, there's a bunch of cool stories and a bunch of cool, art and photography and poetry and all that kind of stuff if you guys are interested. So there's that as well. Shameless plug.
Actually, something that may be good for you to touch on, since you finished OCAD and you're navigating in the pandemic and stuff like that. What do you think is, because there's probably a variety of students here that are on that are doing, you know, first, second, third, fourth year. Some might be recent graduates. Do you have any advice for like navigating after you graduate? You know, trying to
Yeah.
find opportunities and applying for things like bursaries, awards, this kind of thing, like workshops, any call for facilitators, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, OCAD does a great job actually in terms of, for example, I mean, one of the words that stood out was bursaries and awards. I think actually nowadays, I might be wrong, so someone correct me if I'm wrong, but they actually automatically enroll you in whatever bursary or award related to the school that you're eligible for, which is great. Um, but I mean, in addition to that, there's a lot of obvious like third-party bursary and awards that you can always apply to. I think for me personally, I mean, I didn't, but I think it would have been great to actually be able to. So I definitely encourage everybody to do that. In terms of what to do after you graduate, I always envisioned myself that I would go straight to work, not like big crazy work, but even being able to do like an internship or something after I graduate, which you know, obviously kind of fell apart because COVID. But I would encourage everyone, regardless of, you know, even if you're in your first year, fourth year, or you graduated, go for some kind of internship opportunity. Kind of get yourself out there in terms of being able to get that work experience. Because I mean, now recently I've been able to get work experience within like architecture and stuff, which has been great. But I think for me personally, I would have liked to have it even earlier. So, you know, the earlier you start, the better it is. So there's that as well. Resources like the student union, of course, are very great. Setting up these workshops are really great because it pulls in, you know, skills and different kind of tips and tricks from people, not just within environmental design, but, you know, the great thing about OCAD is that you're surrounded by different kinds of creatives who have different kind of skill set. So, you know, attend these workshops. I think, especially since they're, you know, free, it really doesn't hurt to take the time to just be able to go to these kind of workshops and see what else you can learn. Because I think it's going to be beneficial no matter what, if you're an artist or a designer, to be able to know these things. Yeah, and I guess the last one I'd say is actually talk to your profs. Your profs actually know a lot of stuff, even if they make it seem like they don't. And they more likely or not have a lot of knowledge in terms of what the field will be like for you after you graduate. So definitely stay connected with them, especially if there's a prof or two that you really do enjoy working with. Get their contact information, because after you leave OCAD, it might be a bit harder to get a hold of them. So yeah, keep in contact with them as well, I would say.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And you mentioned next workshops and stuff like that. Just to let everyone in here know, we have our next workshop is the end of March, and it's going to be on, I believe it's creating a zine, like how to actually do it and stuff like that. And then the following one is the last week of April, and it's going to be on experimental comic design. Their portfolios were amazing. The same with Lukas. That's why we went with a variety of 3 workshops for the rest of the semester. And there's going to be more workshops every month going into the summer as well. But those are the ones we've booked for now. I had a question. Actually, somebody else had a question first. We can go to that. They had a question about your clean arc shapes from Florence 3000.
So in terms of the Florence 3000 project, that was a lot more intensive in terms of creating the visuals. So it actually was a lot more 3D modeling. So using programs like SketchUp and AutoCAD to really start to make those shapes. But making the arc itself was really just you know, using the arc tool within the software. So if you are familiar with SketchUp, in terms of making those shapes, I would highly recommend just abusing the arc tool. And even if you're not familiar with SketchUp, you know, it'd be a fun thing to learn. I think the cool thing about SketchUp is that it's really easy to kind of get a hang on. So yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks.
You mentioned like the internships and stuff like that. I think we're all familiar with Talent Network. Would you say that that's the best spot to find where these are listed? Do you know of any other sources?
The Talent Network is actually something I definitely referred to a lot, especially during my 4 years. So I would say definitely start with the Talent Network, because that's kind of almost a curated list for OCAD students. And these are employers that, you know, are looking for, you know, student work, because they're posting it up on these kind of student boards. And there's a lot of opportunities there too. I remember taking a look, and there was a lot of, I mean, at least for environmental design, there was a lot of work related to being able to get that kind of studio experience being in an architecture firm. And some of these things are even uploaded by profs, so you can start to work with your prof as well. There's a lot of opportunities on there, so I definitely encourage doing that. I would almost actually encourage it more than doing kind of the generic job boards. Like, I've spent probably too many hours on Indeed, and I mean, it's great. There's a lot of listings there, but you know, it's hard to get things that are curated to new grads, or just, you know, it's hard to get yourself out there, because every job posting, I would probably assume there's dozens and dozens, maybe just hundreds of people like applying to these things. So definitely make use of the resources that I think AuCAD gives, because they're very catered towards kind of the stream that we're within.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Do we have any other last minute questions for Lukas? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'd just like to take another opportunity to thank Lukas and thank everyone else for joining us on this day. This was a really fun workshop. I learned a lot, took some notes.
Awesome, yeah.
Definitely you can rewatch this on Instagram moving forward. And I will now stop the recording.